Hi everybody, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, episode 16.
Yeah.
Yep.
Officially.
I am Fazz.
And I'm mega rich.
Oh, nice. Yeah. If only you were.
Although,
I don't know. I feel like you are at life.
Rich
I feel
in
like
character.
Yeah, that is true. I think so.
Not much else.
Well, no. I mean, you know, you've got a home and a car and a chair.
A hat.
A hat. You've got a hat.
Got a hat. I mean, which is true.
You do have a hat.
I am a hat owner.
Yeah, you do have a hat. I've seen you in a hat before.
I've got a couple of hats on the go.
Yeah.
Flush. Flush with hats.
You need to sell a hat. Got too many hats. I think that I've got too many hats and belts and shoes. Like, you know, when you just think that, you know,
when did I accessorize so much?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, when did I go to Top Man when I was 20 and just get everything and it's still there? Like, I don't know, really. Yeah, rich in leather, faux leather.
Let's just end it there. Like, we're done here, people. Thanks for listening.
That's what people came to hear. So, speaking of people coming to hear us, we just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that's been listening to the pod since the start, really, but also this week. We're a real bumper week with listens. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of our friends, air quotes, like,
and actual friends.
Yeah, and actual friends.
We do
also
have actual friends.
Yeah, who have probably caught up on a few episodes, which is cool. So thank you guys. I know Fraser, you sort of who we met at Slam Dunk, and you said you'd caught up this week, and there's quite a few people. So we're up over the 400 listen mark now, which is great. You know, we didn't.
That's almost a listener per hour of work.
I mean, you know, when we got towards like 50, we were like, "Whoa!" You know, like this is really hit. You know, struck a chord.
I'm going to go buy another hat.
So yeah, but we really do mean it. We're not great at acknowledging anything that we do well.
We're not great at anything.
No, exactly. Just point proven. But yeah, we really do appreciate you guys listening to it. So, and I'm sure there's like loads of people out there that you know, that I haven't even spoken to like that much about like about the pod and things like that. So, hopefully, you know, we'll get more people on, and you know, we absolutely love doing this. So it's great, and hopefully you guys continue to listen. And please pass it on. We're not begging, I guess, but I am slightly with my hat in my hand. And saying, you know, if you do enjoy it, then, you know, do pass it on to people that you think that might like it. We are diversifying a little bit more into, you know, things that aren't necessarily PSP and PS Vita and things. But, yeah, so thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys. Appreciate. Oh, no, it all went so well till then.
Well, I mean, we are doing, like, FPSs and shmups and stuff. And we should probably explain why we've got this weird mismatch of genres and consoles and stuff anyway, right?
Probably should explain.
Probably.
Let's start. Should we start with the mismatch of what we're doing right now, that I'm seeing you ingest a sour cherry and apple squashy, but also offering me up some lovely Lafroig Scotch.
Yeah,
which
nice.
We're on the Scotch tonight, so
really peaty.
Yeah,
offsets the Squashies quite nice. That is heresy. I'm pretty sure most of Scotland is going to be coming after me now.
Can I dip the squashy into my Scotch?
No!
I'll just swill it together.
Yeah,
it's fine. Okay, so yeah,
it's like a squashy chaser.
Yeah, let's be clear about this. I brought the squashies. Mega Rich brought the Scotch. So, yeah,
that's the sentence I never knew I needed to hear until I heard it.
Right. Okay. So let's just start at ground zero. FPS and shmup. We always say these things and we never actually explain what we mean. There might be people out there that listen and think, what the fuck are you talking about? All the time. But, you know, specifically
in this case.
With those acronyms.
Yeah.
So you are covering the shmups. So what is a shmup?
It is a shoot 'em up. So you are quite often a spaceship or, say, a little character of some description flying from one side of the screen to the other, shooting stuff on your way. Background might be scrolling, it might not, etc., etc. Stuff blows up, more and more bullets. And I've been wanting to cover the these for a while in some way, shape, or form. So I kind of suggested a bit of a comparison. And the problem, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the PSP only had a few and they're really fucking expensive.
Yeah, so the PSP very much has a limited library. It's mostly Japanese games that have been imported. And you can play it because PSP region free, one of those benefits of owning a PSP in 2023, amongst other things. And yeah, so a lot of the shmups are basically a lot of the, I guess, most famous ones like Dariusburst and Metal Slug that you can play on the PSP. You can't get them for much cheaper than 40, 50 quid. And I like shmups. I don't want to play a shmup on my PSP. So I'd rather get another one for another console and talk about that at some other time than I would do certainly play on the PSP, because I guess, but you're going to describe what it's like as a handheld concept, but I just don't feel like it would necessarily fit very well on the size screen. Vita is different, but yeah, we'll soon see. So so which shmups are you going to be talking about?
So I'm going to be doing the PS Vita version of Dariusburst, Chronicles Saviours, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Question is whether or not it's Dariusburst or Dariusburst.
Oh, right, okay.
I have a feeling if you were saying it in Japanese, it might be like Dariusburst or something like that. So I'm going to go with Dariusburst with apologies. And Gundemoniums is the other one. And the main reason I picked that...
Great word.
It is a great word. The main reason I picked it is like there were quite a few candidates. It turned out there were quite a few ways I could have gone. But weirdly, even on Metacritic, this one didn't have any scores.
Oh, wow.
I can't find much in the way of reviews or critical stuff about this game on the Vita. Like it exists on the places which I'll touch on. But yeah.
So I'm hearing that this is going to be a groundbreaking review. Effectively, no one's ever reviewed this game before.
I'm pretty sure some people have reviewed it. Just it's not. I don't know if it was a late release on the Vita as well or something like that, but it seems to have flown under the radar a little bit.
And that's awesome. That's really cool. Finding those
give it
gems.
An airing.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I guess I better talk about what FPSs. Now, I'd say that whilst most gamers would know what a shmup is, it's probably a little bit of a smaller demographic, probably more arcade gamers and your like vintage gamers a bit more. Like, I mean, like, like it's
arguably.
Yeah, I mean, not like. I mean, I'd guess if you're into gaming, you'd probably know what a shmup was, but I'd say that everybody from, and I'm going to say cast a sort of bit of a cloak over it, certainly from a Western gaming point of view, would know what an FPS is, because it seems to have really become an overbearing genre.
It's one of the dominant ones around these parts, isn't it?
And and it's so that's obviously a first person shooter. And when people talk about their favourite games or favourite memories of games, certainly people at our age group, you talk about like GoldenEye, playing those kind of games. I'd say Perfect Dark, your Call of Duties, your Medal of Honors, those kind of games that people kind of go to and probably would have, maybe one or two FPSs where it's like, oh, I absolutely love that game. So they saturate the marketplace, I feel like. So it's really difficult to kind of put a finger on what the really best FPSs are. But there, as a matter of fact, there wasn't loads and loads for the PSP when I picked this as an idea of a genre, but there's still significant amount to be able to talk about. So I've picked Medal of Honor Heroes 2, and I did own initially when I owned a PSP the first game, so I thought I'd pick up the second game, see what that was like, and try and compare it to my memories of half a lifetime ago. And the second game I'm going to play is Brothers in Arms D-Day, which again is another FPS, another World War II game, with a little bit of a different sort of idea around it. It's got a little bit more strategy than Medal of Honor Heroes does. So yeah, they're the two games I picked because they were the cheapest ones on eBay. And but Yeah, so we're going to see what they look like on a PSP, and I've got plenty to say about FPSs on the PSP. But after playing these games, I kind of knew it before playing these games as well. So, so that's what we're going to do. But we are at war.
We've got something to sort out first, don't we?
We need to basically, fuck each other up, on a graphical scale. So...
What?
Scotchy, Scotch. Down it goes. So, we have not decided how we are going to compare these games fully yet.
Yeah, so...
We have a difference of opinion.
So, obviously, because of this genre mismatch, it's going to be a little bit apples and oranges. It's never going to be a like-for-like comparison.
I can throw an apple or an orange at you, either way.
For the record, I did offer to do first-person shooters myself on the Vita, but Fazz was like, no, stay the course, it'll be fine.
But I think that it should be, for the record also, that, whilst it'd be good to compare things, I think that naturally at our hearts, and this is probably why we gravitated towards it, is almost like you are a shmup player, and you love shmups, and I quite like them, but I think that you absolutely love them to pieces, and that's why you should really get to celebrate them, defend them.
Have my chance in the sun.
Yeah, but isn't certainly on the PS Vita, and I mean, we'll obviously come back to shmups at some point across the podcast, but I thought it was a good time, and then like I say, and I play more FPSs. That's just kind of how it's panned out in my life. I mean, I might do. I probably don't actually play every game under the sun, but that is in terms of on
average.
Yeah, on average, that is in. So, so let's see how that goes. But anyway, we need to compare these games, don't we?
Yeah, so we need a framework for this.
We do need a framework.
So when we
had one.
When we did the wipeouts, we went with graphics, controls, music, performance, and content.
Uh-huh.
The notable absence there was gameplay, which I know at the time we said was kind of written through it like a stick of rock. So I suggested something along the lines of like a kind of presentation category, which covers graphics, music, and story if it applies. Careful choice of wording, I hasten to add. Like performance, control, gameplay, and then like a kind of closing statements, anything else kind of category. So you were less sure.
Yeah. So I agree on performance, and I agree on control, and I agree on gameplay. But lumping graphics, music, and story under presentation feels like too much to fit under one umbrella. And my real sticking point there was story. I just think that you can have a great story and a poorly presented game, or a really well presented game and a poor story. So having that all together just feels like a bit... So presentation feels like what a Microsoft PowerPoint would look like, but the actual content would be the story. So you could have one that looks all bells and whistles and shit, but actually it says something like, nothingy, like that sentence was, and or you could have something that's like a lovely grand story, but look, just written on a fag packet.
I think. I mean, I take your point for one thing.
Thank you.
You can having a good story does not necessarily mean you've got great graphics or whatever. Say, but I think of the way that the story is told, is it presenting the story to you? And I think if you've got, say, a retro game, a large part of the story and the setup, say with an arcade conversion of something, so much of the story and the setting of it will be in the manual. You are not guaranteed to have that nowadays. So you are solely reliant on what is in the game and how it presents that story to you in the game in some way, shape or form. In which case, be that static images with text or cutscenes or in-world storytelling, it is still having to somehow present you with that out of context. Or in context, depending on how you look at it.
I'm giggling because I'm not taking points on this. I'm so lost. Yeah, fine, whatever. Just whatever you want to do, man. What were your 5 then? I'm gonna have to change mine on the fly here, so because I'll just bend to whatever your will is. Because
What happened to the back and forth arguing?
No, all right. Well, I disagree with you, but then but
we've got to get on with it.
What we're going to do?
All right, hang on.
I don't think this point was going to go any further than I think it should be different, and you're just going to go, well, I think it should be different.
All right,
I think butted hats for a while.
Let's trade hats. That's the solution to this conundrum. We'll trade hats. Looking at these categories, your version of presentation, story, performance control, and gameplay, I think is easier for me to fit mine into than for you to fit yours into mine.
Right, okay. Oh, that's very kind of you then. So you're kind of just giving me
I will work on the fly.
You are giving me a little bit of a peace.
A reprieve.
Yeah, peace offering. A reprieve. I'm going to tell you right now, that little heads up, I'm going to need it, all right? So
I was going to say, I'm winning this, right? Yeah. I don't care how we categorise it.
No, that's fine. I completely accept that. So, right, okay, cool. So just to clarify then, presentation, which covers graphics and music, story, performance, control, and gameplay. And then we score that and then get an average score and then mid out of 10, effectively. So we score those out of 10. Awesome. Right, okay, cool. I have to change nothing, but as I always state, I am the most basic of us both. So whilst Rich is beavering away on his calculations over there with an actual... Is that a cartridge pen?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I've had it since sixth form.
You...
Oh, yeah.
Fuck me. That is incredible. That is in... Where do you get cartridges from nowadays? The internet, obviously, everywhere.
Smith's.
Who goes to Who goes to
shop?
It's like, surely it costs you loads of money there.
You realise this is just a flex, right? Because I'm writing down the scores.
It's an incredible flex. It was a flex that stopped me in my path. I was just about to start talking about video games, and I saw a cartridge pen in my life.
So the dumb thing is, right, I was expecting you to be like, you're using a pen, not you're using a fountain pen or whatever.
Wait, whoa. Also, fountain pen, cartridge pen.
Fountain pen, but I'm Southern, so you can never take it for granted that I actually say what anybody else on
to be
Earth
fair,
says.
I think a fountain pen is absolutely correct, but...
It does use cartridges. Oh God, we're like arguing again. Can we stop like passively aggressively agreeing to everything?
It's a fucking cartridge pen. Right. Okay, so... Whilst you're beavering away, I may as well start with one of my games.
You may as well, because I've just written MOH as moth. So I'm going to have to go again.
Well, I mean, the game that is MOH, Medal of Honor 2 Heroes, could be described as a moth. So, 2007 release, a sequel to the first game, which was 2006. And I would describe this game as basic. And the reason for that is that there's not a lot to it when we come to the scoring categories. So I will tell you about the game first, and then I'll tell you what the scoring categories are. That would be sensible, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. I'm talking to myself now.
I'm not listening. I'm writing up a table now.
So there's 7 missions surrounding an overall mission, if you will, in northern France during / after D-Day, and it's to find out what the Germans are doing and building, which is V2 rockets. And that is so rote for Medal of Honor. It feels like every Medal of Honor game since Medal of Honor with Jimmy Patterson has been trying to find out, the Germans have got V2 rockets, and it's just like, the death weapon. And it's always the same sort of like, we've got to go find out what those Germans are doing. And it's just like, I know what they're going to be doing. Because unless you turn it into some sort of fantasy land and they started making a different type of weapon, like, it's the V2 rocket. That's where we're going with this. And it even mentions almost like it's trying to be a bit of a mystery at the start, what you're going to go and try and find out what you're doing in 7 missions time. And actually, then in the next sort of bit of exposition, it's like, it might be a V2 rocket. And you're like, what? I don't understand.
We thought it was interior decorated, but it's a V2 rocket.
Well, it used to be a paper hanger, Hitler.
Oh.
Do you not know the song? Who's this geezer, Hitler? And then in the second verse, it's... no. He was a paper hanger when he started his career as Mrs. Schicklgroomer's only son.
Is that song factually accurate?
Dear Adolf Dr. Klanger. I hope so. Why would they make him a paper hanger?
Has that song been fact checked?
Oh shit!
I'm just
I thought
curious.
If not, that segue is fucked. But if it is, that's golden. And either way, it's all getting kept in. So, because we just don't even edit out pods anymore.
I'm not sure what just happened.
No.
I'm going back to my table in the Squashies.
Don't leave me again. It all went wrong for a while. So
I'm not giving you Scotch again.
Don't give me Squashies again. Scotchies? That's what they're now going to be. So you're an OSS operative. That's a standard sort of thing, and you're going over as a bit. So it's like you're almost like a bit of a secret agent, and you go over with the general army, and it's D-Day. And you land on a beach, and then you're into the game. What to say about this game? The controls are really difficult, and this is where I get into the wider FPS chat on PSP. Why do you think the controls are difficult?
You've only got the one stick.
Yeah, and the one stick is underneath the other one directional pad. So with your left hand, you have an analog stick that you can do the same thing you used to be able to do in Doom, which is have the horizontal look. But to do any sort of vertical looking at all, you have to use the face buttons. Medal of Honor does a pretty good job of doing that, actually. And after a little while, it feels quite comfortable, and it's not a problem. And if anything, I kind of applaud it a little bit that actually it uses the buttons as well as it does. And I remember this from the first game as well. You were kind of like, oh, this feels like really weird. But after a little while, you're kind of like, actually, it's fine. But the speed with which your axes move, even when you turn the option up to full speed, is so slow. It's like controlling a tank, but your head is a tank. And it's got a tank hat on. And it's fucking weighing you down. And you're trying to turn to face and hit an enemy with your Thompson submachine gun. And you are just moving ever so slowly towards these 4 Germans that are advancing on you really quickly, and you're like, you can't get to them quick enough to fight them off. It's just like, it's ridiculous. Like, as in,
can you indulge me for a second on a little aside?
I mean, you have to with me. So,
like, no one would see this, but for everybody listening, while Fazz was rotating very, very slowly in the game, he was also rotating very, very slowly in his chair.
Phil's chair.
Phil's chair from work. It was quite the sight to behold. Well played.
So, another Squashy goes in, more bullshit comes out. So there was all the classic Medal of Honor settings. The beach assault, the U-boat dock, the sewers. The music's great. You've still got the theme. Like, the music's always been really good, Medal of Honor. Like, if you have played all the Medal of Honors and played them to the nth degree like I have, you really get that vibe from the score. And it feels like you are actually... it feels like they've really scored the music to the game at moments in the game, and you kind of get... I remember a very specific memory for no reason that me and my friend Dwayne used to... When we used to play a certain level and the music goes dun 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 dun, and for no reason we used to go Joe Pasquale, Joe Pasquale. Yeah, there we go.
That's a song by Weezer.
Yeah, yeah.
Hash Pipe by Weezer.
Yeah. Joe Pasquale, Joe Pasquale. Music's good. So, anyway, but like, the music's always been a really key part of Medal of Honor, and I don't think that unless you play them a lot, or have played them a lot in the past, that you would notice that almost. Like, if you played one or two, you'd be like, oh, it's a pretty good game, it's got okay music. But if you play all of them, you see a really good thread of music. Yeah. For different missions and things. I just want to go back to those controls then. So they really do kind of hamper the game a bit, and the FPS genre on the PSP, and I remember this at the time, and I remember it now, just is completely hamstrung by the fact that you have to use the face buttons on the right hand to be able to use vertical axes when you're trying to shoot at somebody. And it, like I said, this game does a good enough job using that, but it still feels unnatural. And like I say, it's so slow using it as well. So, and I just think that FPS has never really got going on the PSP because of that, because you couldn't think of a way of doing it, really. Like, as in, there's no easy way to manipulate your control pattern to be able to, just make it work. And this was a day where button mapping wasn't really, you couldn't manually button map. It was like, here's 3 control schemes, and you have to use one of them,
Yeah.
and all of them feel cumbersome. So you're in the middle of a heated battle, and you need to be able to react quickly. And I think of playing Call of Duty Warzone now, which I play probably once or twice a week with my friends, and the speed with which you have to react in that game now. If you had to use the controls that you had on the PSP to do that, like, everybody would be fucked. But,
but you especially.
Yeah, definitely me. So something that I'm going to bring up now, which I feel like is a pertinent point because it rolls into the next game I'm going to talk about, Brothers in Arms, is your AI squad mates. You do have some AI squad mates with you, but you have no control over them, and they do nothing as well. So they are kind of like, nice sort of GIs who hang around you. Yeah, pretty much. So you'll see, you could hide behind a box and watch your AI squad mates fight the AI enemy, who are dumb as fuck. Oh my word. They're so stupid. But you could watch them, you could literally watch them fight for hours because they don't kill each other. So there's no point to them. It is just scenery. It's a really good way of describing it. And I'm like, is that positive or negative? I can't quite work it out because they don't have any effect on your game. So, you're just playing your game. But then at the same time, what is the point in having them there? They kind of just shout random things every so often, like, grenade! And then you see a grenade go off in the background, which is going to hurt nobody. So it's just like, right, okay, wonderful.
That's code that could have been used on something else.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So it was, a bit of a brief experience as well. 7 missions. I played 4 in this week, and it was about 3 hours. So I'd say maybe double that, taken in difficulty. So it wasn't a massively long game. It does have an online mode, obviously not working anymore. Shut down 2011. That's a lot. That's
later than I thought.
It's a long time it ran for. 4 years. But I remember the online mode from the first game because I played that quite a lot. I remember that was the game I used to try and steal my neighbour's Wi-Fi through the wall to play, and it worked. Nice. Yeah, no, dial up be damned. And it was actually online, 32 people, pretty good. It was an enjoyable multiplayer war map game. And from what I read review-wise on this game, they said the same thing. They said it advanced and it actually got better as well. So it's nice to know that was there if I could have been able to play it. And I have fond memories of playing that initially. You just can't do it anymore. Yeah. And I guess really sort of the last thing was and this accounts for both games that I'm going to talk about, is damage. How much damage you're sustaining. It feels like, I don't know with FPSs, this is a general gripe with me in FPSs, is that if you have one that you don't know how much damage you're sustaining, you feel like you're winning a fight, but you kind of get those blood splotches in the corner of the screen. This felt really like one blood splotch, dead. It was almost like it was just too quick to not show you how much damage you were sustaining. Because even though the AI was really stupid, I was playing on medium difficulty. There was a couple times where I died, and I thought, I don't feel like I should have died there. And I feel like it might be just my own experiences of what I'm used to taking damage-wise nowadays from, say, I don't know, Call of Duty. But certainly it was like 3 bullets, you're done. And I was like, that feels pretty lumpy for a medium difficulty. The first level, breeze through. D-Day, piece of piss. Who knew it? But then, what those veterans talking about. But later on, 3 levels in, and it became quite lumpy. And the checkpoints were really few and far between. So you would fight maybe 30 enemies before you got a checkpoint, say, and then another one. And that's quite a lot of people to go through. And if you are a bit gung-ho like I am, that, not sort of waiting behind boxes and waiting for your AI to chat to the enemy, that is in actually, you want to get on with things. So you pop your head up, get your submachine gun out a little bit, but then actually you get killed and you go, I don't feel like I should have died there. I felt like I was kind of on top of the situation, but that might just be a me thing.
No, I think it's an interesting one because it's not really something that I'd stop to consider. Because, if it's first person, by its very nature, a lot of the time, you might not see where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And, if they made every single bullet coming your way visible, it would be like sensory overload. And like, you know, if we're comparing FPSs and shmups, with shmups, sure, you might only take one hit and blow up in some cases, but you can always see,
where it's coming from.
See the bullets and where they're coming from. So you have that visibility that you wouldn't have in a first person shooter.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I've never really stopped to consider it. I know in like Uncharted they say that, you know, when the screen's getting red and all that, it's like Nathan Drake's luck running out, and then the last one that actually kills you is the bullet that's actually going to kill you. So it's like one hit kills, but they've kind of fudged the excuse a little bit. But yeah, like I think it's probably one of those things that if you are a good first person shooter developer and designer, it must take a hell of a lot of work to get right.
Yeah, and it feels like, and I can see why, like, some just kind of go with damage bars now, because I'm just a bit like, whilst that is arcadey in its way, that it's not realistic, at least you know where you are, like, as a gamer, you know what I mean?
Something to literally and figuratively gauge it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll crack my scores out for this then.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go for it. So, presentation, graphics and music, 5. Story, 3. Not really existent, if I'm going to be honest, apart from a couple of like sort of still frames. I mean, the setting is nice and general Medal of Honor-y. It would be the way I would describe it.
Classical war.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. Performance, 4.
Really?
I would say, yeah.
Start getting a bit chuggy or something.
Just, yeah, when you... Like you said, if they use less coding on the AI, when, say, a couple of enemies are running down a hill towards you to try and, like, attack you in a fast manner, like, you know, maybe come and melee you, like, they are kind of coming at you, like, it feels a bit like, yeah, it doesn't feel like there's oil running on the chainsaw.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Control, 2. I'm giving it.
That low?
Yeah.
Quick question on that, because I know like Metal Gear Solid, what was it, Peace Walker, had a kind of thing where you'd move on the left stick, and then your face buttons would be like look left and right and up and down and all that kind of stuff. When you played it on Vita, you could remap those face buttons to the right analog stick. Yeah. It sounds to me like even if you did that, it wouldn't really make for too nice a playing experience because your head movements are so slow.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is that
that was definitely like a factor in that. Like, as in, so I mean, the fact that you have got the option to put the axis speed up to maximum and it was still sluggy. You're like, my word, like, you know. So yeah, that was a real problem, especially when like you're in the middle of a sniper battle. You're like sort of just tracking across, like, as in, yeah. Oh, my fucking head's been blown off. And then, Joe Pasquale shot me in the face. So, and then gameplay 6. So, yeah, I felt like it. You know, I was enjoying it at times, and you know, as a general sort of feel, I could get through the game, unlike Sims 2, and be like, you know, I feel like I've enjoyed bits of the game enough to be like, you know, I can recommend playing the game for a bit. So, yeah, that was a score of 20 out of 50, which is... Are we just going to go straight for that? We're not going to drill it down to out of 10?
I'll sod that.
Oh.
I mean, you want to give it out of 10?
I did the math.
You already done that? Oh, if you already done that.
We give everything out of 10, don't we, normally?
Yeah, all right.
So 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10.
Yeah, which is not a recommendation overall, unfortunately. So... Cool. Okay. Cool. So, yeah, we're already at half an hour. So, you know, this is going to be a long pod. Sorry, guys. Right. Okay. Let's talk shmup. Talk shmup.
Oh. But sorry, I thought you were going to go to yours.
Oh, sorry. No, I thought we'd go one on one. We're not.
Right.
I don't want to talk for that long. Christ.
Okay. Cool. Let's do Dariusburst then. So, what am I saying about this? The Darius series goes way back, right? So arcade shmups, horizontal scrolling, and you are shooting mechanical fish in space.
Yeah.
So it's quirky. It's not the quirkiest.
Once you've played it for a long time, though, that is in. So when we've been to arcade clubs so many times, you're just so used to.
Space fish. Yes, fish, you do get weirdly desensitized to space fish. Episode title. So The Dariusburst was kind of like a spin-off series, I guess, kind of a continuation. It had a bit of a hiatus and came back as this Dariusburst thing because of like named after one of the mechanics they added into the game where you have this kind of burst laser thing. So this particular version was updated, I think, slightly differently to the PSP. It has the arcade version on it. It's got what was it, like Chronicles Saviour mode on it, which is kind of like a mission mode, and it's also got options to add in a load of DLC. So a couple of quick disclaimers on all this. I have a version of this game on my phone.
Okay.
You can play it on most things nowadays in some way, shape, or form. I also bought it on the PS4 a while back. So you're able to use DLC for, like, if you bought it digitally, no problem. You can use it on the PS4. In theory, you've got like cross-buy with the Vita as well.
Okay.
It applies to the DLC. I don't think it applies to the game itself.
Right.
So I've got a load of DLC on my Vita that I could, in theory, use. But the version of the game I've got on my Vita is the cartridge from Limited Run Games, which doesn't have the patch on it, which lets you use the DLC.
Oh my word.
So I have a nice flashy looking DLC option on my main menu on the Vita, and I can't use like the DLC that I've got on the PS4, even though it's in my downloads list.
Yeah.
It is and it isn't. In fairness to Limited Run Games, they made no bones about the fact that it's not going to have that functionality when they put it out. But at the same time, for me, that DLC stuff, because you have... the game is kind of like a love letter to a lot of the old Darius games anyway. So from a bunch of the older versions, you can play as each of the ships and stuff like that, which is very cool. They're all like mechanically slightly different. You have different options for shots and whatnot. You can still use those in the DLC mode, but a big draw of me buying it in the first place when I originally picked it up was the fact that on top of that, in the DLC mode, you had a load of spaceships from like shooters past from a bunch of different developers who are renowned for these things. And so you could go in and they would put a spin on the Dariusburst mechanics with a flavour of, say, Cave or Rising or Sega or whoever else. So to not have that on the handheld was a little bit of a sort of left a bit of a bitter taste.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, I still really like the game. Like, the game itself is still good. But I do think that that's an important point to mention, especially if you are thinking of collecting for these things, because the cartridges, even secondhand, are not cheap because they were limited anyway. Yeah. Turns out limited by name and limited by fucking nature, right? So just bear that one in mind. So this will ignore all that. And I'm not going to go into the mechanics of shmups. Like, in fact, I wrote them down. I want to give some honourable mentions. If you want mechanics, right, go find... get on YouTube, go find Shmup Junkie or the Electric Underground, Shmups on Switch, Bullet Heaven, like any of those channels will go into way more mechanical depth than I will, right? If you want to find out about the true, like how deep these games go look at that lot. So, me, I'm here for the Space Fish. So the arcade mode, and kind of I guess the biggest sticking point for this game with me on the Vita, in fact, you already mentioned playing it down on Arcade Club, right? It's that game. It's that exact game. Yeah. In Arcade Club, you will have noticed that the monitor is about 6 million miles wide.
So satisfying.
It is incredibly satisfying. And, I mean, how would you describe it for people listening? It's basically big enough so that you can have, four people sat shoulder to shoulder, and you all have a screen in front of you, but it's one big screen, right? So they just scale that down for the arcade mode on Vita.
Can you get 4 people around one Vita?
You can try. It's squinty enough for one.
One index finger each.
It can get a little bit difficult to see. The Chronicles Saviour's sort of mission mode doesn't do that. It zooms it more in like the console versions of the old arcade games used to do.
Yeah.
So it's full screen, and you have a narrower field of view.
Yeah.
It looks good. Backgrounds are occasionally a little bit drab, but then there's usually so much other stuff going on that you kind of don't notice. While the arcade mode is quite, let's say, faithful to the aspect ratio of the arcade game, it does mean that you kind of get the full effect of seeing these swarms of enemies like going around, and it is like fish, like they do swarm, and on higher difficulties they will usually be shooting at you as well. So like you have these big curtains of bullets, and like I'd never say that it quite got like bullet hell. Which would be like really dense patterns, having to do little tiny movements to navigate these things. They're not quite like that, but you do get this sense of like overwhelming odds and stuff like that, and it is quite cool. Obviously, in the Chronicles Saviours mode, that's lost a little bit, but you do kind of have it broken up a little bit more in Chronicles Saviours. That's the trade-off. You can go and you can sort of save progress, and you will eventually see a bunch of stages. There's variations on the bosses, so it's not one-to-one to the arcade mode. It's got its own quirks and little spins on the formula and stuff like that. So there's plenty of stuff to sink your teeth into if you're that way inclined. And I mean, for performance and control, no real complaints, which, dare I say it, is a compliment. Like, I know it sounds like I'm damning with faint praise, but nothing jumped out as being too egregious.
That's what you want, though, isn't it? Like,
exactly.
It's difficult, isn't it? When you score something, you kind of go, well, if it's not struggling or I can't see it struggling, then it must be, maybe not perfect, but it must be working.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily the case with the other game I'm going to go on to. So I think it is worth mentioning.
Definitely.
The overall package, I really enjoyed it. And is it my favourite Darius game? No, but I could play as my favourite ship from my favourite Darius game in this. And it was like, oh, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know where the bombs are. I know what they're going to do. I know how they'll behave. And lo and behold, I could get much further into the game than I could than when I was using any of the other ones. So it was nice to know that kind of experience carried over. So scores-wise, you might have to help me with the maths here, because I've not actually assigned any numbers.
We can do that. Let's do it.
So, dropping my pen lid. Presentation, graphics and music.
You're really out in the south.
Drop my pen lid. I forgot to mention music. Like, the Darius games musically will quite often be quite avant-garde, quite jazzy, quite like unsettling, but not necessarily in kind of abrasive way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, say from playing the arcade one and stuff, like, it feels secondary to the experience in terms of the SFX, but so it's not memorable, but it feels like it's part of the game.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, they kind of, it's mood music more than anything. That said, there are certain Darius tracks on my favourite one, for example, where they are memorable. Like, they do stick in your head. That's not the case here. They do the job, but they're not a high point for the series. So I'm going to go with 7.
Yep.
For presentation, 7 feels good.
Cool.
Story, Mechanical Space Fish, I'm giving it 10.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot mess with that, really.
Like, there is a story, I just genuinely didn't stick around long enough to tell you what it was.
No, that's fine.
So,
I mean,
but if it was wrapped in with presentation, I could have knocked some points off for that.
Oh my word, jeez, God, that
playing the long game.
Yeah.
Performance. Yeah, like, again, it's one of those things where it didn't, like, there are some judders between levels, but when you're playing it, it didn't really like upset itself too much. And I mean that as a compliment, because with everything that's going on, like, it is under some strain. So I think that's probably going to be getting up to about an 8 quite happily.
Cool.
Control, again, like, I think that's an easy 8.
Yep.
Gameplay, I mean, I've made no bones about it. I'm a fan of the series. I like how this game works. It's not the high point in the series for me, but it is good. I would quite happily, from some of the other shmups that I've seen on the Vita, unless you start dipping into like PS1 and PSP games that you've digitally done, I think this is one of the better Vita shooters.
Okay.
So I easily 7. I think you could argue that an 8, but I'm not going to because I already took the piss with story.
I mean, I was going to say to you, you are comfortable nuking our scoring system over our podcast so far on the strength of Mechanical Fish.
I will quite happily die on that hill.
That's fine. I mean, it works out well for a score then, nice and rounded.
Yeah.
8 out of 10.
Funnily enough, that's
what you feel.
That was what I was feeling. I'm happy with that.
I feel like that's what it sounds like. So
yeah. I'm pretty chuffed with that.
Yeah, cool, good.
Well done, Dariusburst.
Yeah, well done us. Hooray! So we're going to take a quick break because I want more Scotch and it's empty. And then we'll come back and review another game from the PSP as an FPS and a shmup from the PS Vita, and then we'll see how they look together. And then, I mean, we won't even really have a fucking argument about what's better.
Not really. We'll just continue to be annoyingly polite at each other.
Well, no, I think it's just more that this is a beat down, really. So, or a beat 'em up. So, yeah, back soon. Okay, so we've had our little musical interlude there. We picked that one because we thought it sounded like Space Fish, and if you don't, no one can hear Space Fish because no one can hear you scream in space or the fish screaming at you. But anyway, you get the idea. That's what they would sound like coming towards you. I forgot what the interlude sounds like now. I hope it sounds like Space Fish. All right, so let's roll on to my second FPS then. So this is Brothers.
I mean, I've just written bro in arms here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad because I can't say the word brothers anymore. Brothers in Farms. Brothers in Farms. Brothers in Arms, D-Day, 2006 FPS. So I am led to believe, this is how much of a non-gamer I am, that the Brothers in Arms series was quite a popular PC game in the early 2000s, and a lot of people really enjoyed it because of the mechanics of the game, where you played as a squad and you could command your squad to do different things across, and it was a bit of a strategy across the battlefield. And this game actually gives you something that is, I would expect to see in a PC game and not on a PSP game, which is a bird's eye view of the battlefield when you require it as you're going through levels, so you can actually zoom out of the battlefield.
Nice.
And I believe that I was like, oh, this feels very almost strategy PC gamey. And then I read a review about it. It was like, oh, this was never in the PC game. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. This feels like exactly where it should have been. So anyway, it's a World War II shooter. And it is the exact same game as Medal of Honor story-wise. You are a paratrooper.
Fill the scores in now.
Pretty much, yeah. You are a paratrooper unit dropped behind enemy lines on the morning of D-Day, and effectively just like Band of Brothers, and you fight your way back to the beach, and then you continue missions through Normandy together with your squad. The difference being here that your squad actually is a vital part of what you do.
So, they do stuff?
They do stuff,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, I get them killed. That's what I do with them.
Well, it's doing something, isn't it?
But then they magically reappear the next level, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, which is what happens. You use them as an actual tool to help you complete the main core mechanic of the game, which is effectively the levels are quite short, and they're just sort of like events, really, where it might be like 2 or 3 Nazis are holding up with a machine gun in a farmhouse, and the idea is that you have to flank them and get around them, and then it makes it easier for you to be able to dispatch them, and you use your team to suppress them.
Right.
Which is great, and it's really fun to kind of work out that's a mechanic, but there's 2 things wrong with that. A, it's the only mechanic in the game. So the game is you just do that like 100 times. That is in, you just go, right, I think it's called Lieutenant Heartstock. You stay here, you stand by this tree, you use it for cover, and then you fire at those enemies over there. And then there is a little sort of way of knowing how suppressed they are so that you can make your move. So they've got a red sort of I don't know what to call it, a little floating
like
sort of
thing.
icon above their head, like a sim thing, and it'll be red, and then it'll turn to grey once they are suppressed. So basically, they're laying down, suppressing fire. You sneak around. There's usually 1 or 2 different ways you can sneak around this area, and then there's a main thoroughfare, which if you went down, you get killed.
Right.
So the idea is you have to go either of these ways. You can use your bird's eye view to see around the battlefield, to see, oh, actually, there are different ways here and here, and it tells you where your team is, where the enemies are, which is kind of cool. And then you sneak round, and then you kill them. And that's kind of it, really. You just do that a lot of times, which is annoying after a while, because it's like the idea, like when you first experience it, like, oh great, this is really cool, but then you're just like, why do I continue just to do this over and over? That is a sign of madness. and I'm experiencing it right now.
It almost sounds like it's a puzzle game.
Yeah, weirdly. In a way. Yeah. Almost. It is odd. It is meant to be an FPS game, but also it seems to be the main focus is almost trying to solve these puzzles using a strategy view.
Yeah.
So, and that definitely plays out in the way that they have set up the controls.
Mm.
The controls, as I've obviously described previously about FPSs on PSP, are notoriously difficult anyway. They have mapped onto this game a command structure, which adds another sort of 4 or 5, 6 controls. And then you've got this weird thing where, so you'd have to use your circle button to zoom in onto your gun further to give you a zoom mode. And then you have to use that to move around. And when I talked about Medal of Honor having tank controls, this is the slowest game I've ever played trying to turn a gun on something. It is ridiculous. Like I can't describe it enough how bad it is trying to... You're in the middle of a war. The idea is that you should feel panicked. You should be feeling that sort of, right, I need to make a move in the next 2 seconds unless I am dead. You don't have that ability. You run around these people and you flank them, and then you go, oh great, they're here. I'm ready to kill them. I've got my gun out. And then you zoom into your first person mode using these really weird controls to do it. And then you can move the gun around, but it's almost like you're moving it through some sort of weird, shitty space fish poo. Like, I don't know. It's awful. Like, and then you get killed because you're not quick enough to react to the people you've just got the jump on. Like, by the time you've got the jump on them, they're almost like, it's like they must be looking at you thinking, what the fuck is this human doing? Like, it's in like I don't understand. He's definitely got the upper hand. He's pointing a gun at me, kind of, but he can't quite aim it quick enough to kill these guys off. It's just insane how bad the control system is on this game. I've never played a worse game for control system.
Wow.
Ever. I just can't describe it. Is it unplayable like The Sims 2? No, that was all performance. That is in. So you can, if you stick with it, if you want to try and sort of get by with it, you can. But it does become monotonous when you're doing the same mechanic of the flank, then taking forever to kill somebody. And sometimes it's just that you just let them melee you to death because it's just simpler and easier and feels nicer. So, yeah, a quite stressful experience to really try and think, I've got to do this game for the pod and I should really give it a go. And you play about an hour and a half and go, I can't play anymore because I don't want to. Not completely unplayable, but not as fun in terms of the control and the monotonous gameplay. That said, obviously I'm speaking out 2 sides of my mouth here because the special gameplay in terms of having the strategic and the puzzle element actually makes it a point of difference from normal FPSs, and certainly felt like an improvement almost on Medal of Honor because it wasn't just the basic run and gun situation.
I do wonder if it would have been a stronger game had it focused on one thing or the other. Probably just the strategy side of things.
Yeah. It feels like it, almost in a way, you feel like if they had just focused, if it had just been a strategy game, and it had been a Brothers in Arms strategy game on the PSP, and maybe you have to do a little bit of action, but it almost feels like they've just kind of like had developers have kind of gone, oh, we need to try and sling all this together, and the good bits are the bits that you don't play very often. You kind of go, well, that's a cool idea, but you don't you actually don't even really need it. Like, as in you could do the whole game without playing with the bird's eye view, and also like the flank sort of thing. You could kind of just run around and kill them anyway, even with you guys not suppressing them. It's a bit weird, like, as in the things that make it stand out are the bits they don't use and kind of like, you know, hamper the game because they're trying to use them.
Yeah. That's a weird one.
Yeah. So, but I'd say graphically it's better than Medal of Honor, which is the Medal of Honor 2, which is a year younger than this game, which is quite interesting. It actually has really good graphics, and the story has a bit more heart to it. Although, again, that is a little bit rote. Like, you kind of cringe when sort of, you know, one of the GIs is going, what do Krauts have for breakfast anyway? Sausages. And you're like, man, like, is it just like, you know, like, just boring as fuck. Like, as in World War II is the most important, interesting, pivotal part of history, and somebody's writing that shit about it. And you're like, oh, man, like, you know, like, just, you like, you know, purchase a writer for £3, and then you probably, you know, like, as in, just don't have a game developer go, oh, this will be funny. Like, as in, you know, the 17th time it's happened since 1996. It's just like, oh, in media. It's really frustrating. So, another game where grenades were actually fucking pointless. I threw a grenade, it landed at the feet of 2 Nazis, and it did nothing. Like, I was like, what's the point in having this weapon? It does nothing. So, yeah, lots of frustrating parts of this game. But it did have some redeeming features, and it made it difficult for me because I was like, right, well, is this better or worse than Medal of Honor? Because I kind of probably expected more out of both of them, really, and they both ended up being on the shit side of 5. So, scoring this game then, presentation, graphics and music, I give it a 5. So even though it was the same as Medal of Honor, graphically it was better, but there wasn't much by the way of music or anything like that at all, really. So, story, 6. So there was much more to it than the Medal of Honor, in terms of obviously there being a bit more heart to it, and you're banding together with your brothers in arms. Hey, there's something there. But performance, I said a 5. So it felt a bit laggy. Like, it just. And I think it probably felt like that when it came out. And I'm guessing that all these games kind of did. And it's almost like, you know, you come across PSP games and you come across your wipeouts, your burnouts and stuff, and you think, God, this performs really well and performs really well now. And then you go back and you go, I feel like if I'd paid full price for this at the time, I would have felt like, oh yeah, this is a great game, I really enjoyed myself. Now I'm like, fuck me, if I'd paid full price, like, my word, I'd have felt such a rip-off.
Tell you what, like, especially going back to some of the Vita's first-person shooters, I swear blind, like, I would happily put money on this argument that, like, first-person shooters, because they were such big money, like, that's where it's really, really clear to see that the ambition for these handhelds did not necessarily always match the execution. Like, first-person shooters seem to be the genre that on these handhelds, like, they would always have really lofty ideas, and sometimes some really interesting ideas, and they would just never be able to see it through because of the hardware.
Yeah. So, Control 1.
Really?
Yeah. Like, it's in. It is the worst. Can I give it a 0? I mean,
I don't see why not.
I'm going to give it a 0. Like,
you can't give it a decimal point, but
no, but it was a 0 for me. Yeah. Wow. I don't understand. I do understand that they were trying to map commands onto this PSP, but for a console that was already struggling with the idea of having enough buttons and enough movement for an FPS, to then overlay that with more buttons.
Do the commands
it's
as well.
so hard. It's so difficult. You're pressing triangle to move your guys. You're pressing circle to zoom your gun in. You're moving your guy around. You're using your face buttons to then, which is also your movement buttons. It's so complex for something that didn't need to be complex.
Yeah.
And then gameplay 6. So again, you know, that the idea of the game, and it's playable for a few hours. You know, like, as in, I get what they were trying to do, and you kind of go, well, actually, you know, for a little while the mechanic's cool, and then it just gets too samey after that. So, you know, overall 4.4 out of 10. So we'll call it a 4 again. You know, but it was a little bit better than Medal of Honor Heroes 2 because of the concept of the idea of trying to bring in new things, the strategy sort of puzzle side of it, like you said, but it just didn't work either. So
yeah, but I mean, at least they gave it a go.
Well, that's it. I applaud it for that, and that's about all they're getting from me. So
I'm trying
when
to
I say I applaud it, they get this.
Nice. Because I think there was a Brother in Arms game on like the Xbox 360 or something like that.
Yeah,
I can't remember
Hell's Highway or something. It is.
I can't remember if that had that kind of top-down view. I have a feeling it might have. So I wonder if they crowbarred it in because it was in like doing the rounds anyway at the time or something. Yeah.
Potentially. So
anyway,
yeah, I'm really sorry you had to listen to these reviews, listeners, because they suck ass.
At least you know.
Although I will say this, and it's an interesting point that I just want to bring up with you and see what you think about it.
Yeah.
Both of them scored one more than Call of Duty Black Ops 3 that you reviewed for the Vita. You give that a 3 out of 10.
Yeah. And I think that's because Call of Duty on the Vita felt fundamentally flawed. And like, it was one of those, in fact, that's a really good example of what I was just saying about how like the ambition didn't match the execution, because like, you know, that they had all sorts of stuff like jumping through windows and things like that. It's like, well, if you can't execute it properly and have it so that like, you know, as I'm falling down, I'm shooting shards of glass in front of my face and I'm not hitting anything behind it. Like, either move that out of the way, like, it can still be cinematic, but it can be cinematic 3 centimetres to the left. You know? Like, I'll still see it. Yeah. It just won't be in my way.
That episode is our third most popular episode. And
poor souls.
I still believe it's because of the amount of detail that you went into with that game.
I got a lot off my chest.
It was fascinating. I loved it. I had a great time. So please have a good game.
Gundemoniums.
Please have a good game.
Have a good game. Yeah. So besides the kind of weird radio silence on the kind of reviews front, the other reason I picked this was because it was one of the few games on the Vita that explicitly billed itself as like a bullet hell. So as a sort of very quick, very broad, probably very wrong definition, the reason a bullet hell is like a kind of specific subgenre of shooters is that say you were facing down a space fish, and that space fish fired one bullet at you, you would be in a shmup. If that space fish fired about 10 times that plus in a sort of fanning motion, followed quickly by like some weird spirals, and it was all neon coloured and just trippy as fuck, you're in bullet hell territory, my friend.
I'm gonna not sleep well tonight. That's gonna be there. I'm gonna have this scotch, and that is gonna be there.
It's gonna be
and
there.
I'm gonna freak out. That is gonna be kicking my wife in the face, and then like, ah!
I like bullet hells.
I live in them.
I find them strangely calming. I do. Because
what's wrong with you. You're so calm all the rest of the time, and now you're even more calm in bullet hell.
But yeah, no, I genuinely I think there's something when you like you've got to get used to it, right? You've got to be able to sort of appreciate where you're looking on the screen and find these little gaps in these patterns and just weave your way through. And then it gets to the stage that you're almost not really looking at what you're shooting at to take out the targets. You're trusting that you're hitting them. You're concentrating on dodging. And I find there's something oddly zen-like when you manage to nail that. And what I found with this game is that is a tricky feeling to nail. By crikey, when you nail it, it's great. But when you don't, there's just feels a little flat. So Gundemoniums is odd. It's an odd duck.
End of review.
So, I think, from what I saw, it's a port, maybe a bit of a remaster of an old, I think it was like 2003 PC game, like an indie PC game, right? And so a lot of, like, as I was playing it, I had this odd feeling of like, in theory, this should be ticking so many boxes, and yet it's not. Like, what is missing here is, and I was almost going to say like, oh, but it feels like it's missing some soul. I was like, no, come on, I can pin it down better than that. Like, that's an easy way out of this. And I think what it is that when you play it, it feels as though someone sat down and went, this is what a bullet hell should look like. And then someone else took it away, made it, and it was fine. Like it ticked all the boxes, you know, it's all there. It's just that there's not like a kind of level of artistry or a level of creativity or a spark to really draw the players in. You know, there's not an interesting scoring mechanic or a crazy good soundtrack or, you know, something, right? There's not something to latch onto. There's no hook. And then I found out that if it was from 2003, well, yeah, that'll be why, because this would be one of the fucking early ones. This is when the foundational building blocks were being put in. So then suddenly I was like, well, yeah, that explains it. It's like, you know, I said the other week about buying Raiden. Raiden is quite often held up as like a very typical shooter, quote unquote, and that's because so many of the kind of tropey stuff, if they didn't start there, it sure as hell came together, you know. And so it sort of feels like it's everything at the same time, and it feels like nothing at the same time because it's, you know, it fits in this weird spot in history. And I wonder if Gundemoniums also falls into a similar category. So it's a strange beast to try and approach when you see it in that kind of light. Presentation-wise, and I'm going to go through the categories here for a reason that will become apparent. Presentation-wise, like it's pretty. It is a pretty-looking game. Where it's horizontally scrolling, generally speaking, if you're playing a horizontal scrolling shooter compared to a vertical one, you're more likely in the horizontal one to be dodging environmental obstacles. Right? I don't think it's written in stone somewhere. There are plenty of things that play with that kind of notion, but you're more likely to have to, you know, juke around lumps of rock or asteroids or whatever. Whereas a vertical one, you're more likely to just be ploughing through everything and not worrying too much about where you're aiming. It's not a hard and fast rule, but generally. In this, there's not much of that environmental stuff. Like, it just doesn't happen. There's some weird bullet patterns, but that's about it.
And just talk to us about bullet patterns, because I just try and come from a layman's term, because you spoke to me about it previously, and how, you know, is it just play through when you get used to the bullet patterns, or is it just that you know the certain type of boss that you've got or a certain type of enemy that you've got? You just, after a minute, you just learn their pattern and that's it? Just
effectively, yeah. And like, so in fact, you know, rally driving.
I mean, I know of it.
Yeah,
you know,
but you know, you have
rally.
But you know, you have a co-driver, right, who have the notes on their lap.
Got him.
And they'll be reading pace notes while the driver is driving.
Yes.
Right, so the driver knows what's coming up. You can play a shmup in the same way. Like, I know of people online who have sat there with basically pace notes.
Right. Okay.
For like helping to aid memorization through the game. And one of the things with Gundemoniums that I found was that if you were playing it on novice, it was, if anything, quite dull, because so little would be shooting at you. It's like, this isn't really...
What's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
What is the point?
I've got loads of room to move. Okay, sure, I can kind of get a rough idea of when this thing turns up on screen. It's more likely to be shooting a weird kind of set of square patterns that I have to treat almost like a maze that's moving. Or this one will turn up and everything will be, you know, a spiral, or this one will turn up and it'll suddenly cut off half the screen and I have to deal with, you know, a really confined space. Little did I realise that as soon as I bumped the difficulty up, they were still doing that and then just throwing in the odd extra attack at the same time. So suddenly it was like, okay, but I know this one's going to turn up and cut off half the screen. So I know that I have to deal with this new thing in this, And so it helped. It did help. And yeah, you do learn that kind of memorization. And it is exactly that. You get a sense of what's going to come at you, when and how. And that all plays into the learning.
I can just see a scene, and it's like from Cool Runnings, where Darius is in the bath with his photos of the turns, and just like 3 or 4 people playing a shmup. Like, it's just like,
you're not far off, right?
Just like sat behind each other in a bobsleigh.
I would happily assume that someone is out there trying to like learn a shmup blindfolded from pace notes that someone else is reading. I bet it's either
that'd be great.
Or happening. Because like
this is why we do this podcast, because that image now, I'm like, that's video gaming.
Let's do it. Like, let's try it. One time we will try it. We will find something easy and we will just write some pace notes and we'll try it blindfolded. Fuck it. I'm up for that. I am going to write that down.
Write it down with your fucking fountain pen.
So yeah, like it's it's pretty to look at, but at the same time, there's not much to it. It's really odd. Like a lot of the enemies that I didn't finish it in any way, shape, or form. So obviously there could be a bunch of stuff in the tail end that I didn't see, but a lot of enemies got recycled quite quickly. You've got like rabbit wizards in cloaks, or you've got like bunny girls with massive boobs sitting on top of improbable guns, and sometimes you just have the guns themselves floating around shooting at you, or I think the Angry Birds turn up at one point.
Oh, really?
Or like a spoof of.
A version of.
Certainly I was mowing down a series of red, yellow and blue birds who looked miffed. And, bits and bobs like that. It's quirky, but is it mechanical space fish? No, I don't think it is. But it's got like a nice kind of hand-drawn sort of style. But at the same time, it just sort of leaves you a bit cold, because it's like, well, where's the spark?
It's funny, isn't it? Like, you kind of just get a game from the same genre and on the same console, and the idea of it is the same, and then you do get that kind of like where you kind of, this game just makes me feel a bit less excited than another one.
It didn't spark my imagination in the same way, and like it's mechanically functional, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, you've got a couple of different characters, they've got different moves. One of them you can customize a little bit, and at one point, in fact, I'll come on to it with controls. Like it gives you ways of counteracting some of the negatives I found and things like that. But at the same time, the whole experience was like slightly deflating. Okay, I guess. Like, it wasn't negative. It was just a bit like ho hum. So while I'm doing categories, because I need to remember to stay on course, story.
Stay on target.
Stay on target.
Stay on target.
Being a sort of Japanese developed indie shmup, the English in it is not fantastic. So, as a sort of flavour of story,
this is going to be great. I'm already feeling good about this.
At the start of the first level, I quote, "In the 18th century, human society has achieved fast development by an alchemician at the time, but something to which much isn't preferred was shown into this world as the compensation of this prosperity." Now, I don't know what that thing was.
And you didn't want story to be separate from presentation, because I want that just to have its own category.
So this...
Oh, that's why you were hiding it.
Just bury it deep. But it does kind of leave me with a bit of a weird sort of, okay, well, yeah, like I get it. Having read it through a couple of times, I see what you're getting at. But at the same time, like, it's just not grabbing me. Like saving the world and the universe from a marauding empire of space fish. Fuck yes, sign me the fuck up.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
surely.
Yeah, exactly. But this, like, I think they were going for something a bit more engaging, detailed, maybe. I mean, they don't exactly do much in the way of world building, but then quite a lot of these sorts of games will be quite good at building a world in the game.
Yeah.
And, they'll have incidental background details and things like that will...
That's one of the things that I noticed when I see a shmup, and I've seen you play plenty, and, I've had a couple of little dabbles myself, nowhere near to the extent that you do, but I do want to get into the genre more, and it's like, and you do notice that and sort of see, well, actually, you build your own sort of story in a way that you kind of get from the details around what's going on, and it's that's cool in the background, and that makes sense, and it's nice to kind of almost build your own in your head while you're doing it. Like,
right. So like there's a game by Turplan called Flying Shark that has Flying Shark or Fire Shark? Oh god, I can't remember. Whichever the second one was. But you start on a runway, you take off, and there's a bunch of people milling around, and then they all get in a formation that makes a giant arrow for the way you're flying.
Right.
And it's just like that little incidental detail suddenly has me so much more engaged in what is going on in this world than anything that Gundemoniums does. And that's like, it feels like a criticism, but at the same time, it's a little development team, you know, especially if you go back to 2003, this would not have been an easy job.
Don't be kind to them.
No,
Come on now.
I'm just trying to contextualize it. But it is, yeah, it's one of those ones that, like, I think you can count it as swing and a miss, fairly. Performance-wise, by and large, fine, but did chug. It didn't chug much, but it did. And the thing is that occasionally you would have something that where you could manually slow down the game, and that's fine. That's good in bullet hell. That can be useful. Yeah. There were times when it would slow down, and I don't think it was deliberate. That, if you're playing a game like this, is a no-no, because that's when it starts to get much harder to judge what you're doing.
Yeah.
But does conveniently bring me on to Control, and this was my kind of big bugbear, where weirdly when you're playing with the PS Vita's stick, everything felt a little twitchy and a little slippery, and like there was no, you were either moving or you weren't. There was no nuance to the speed. If you were using the D-pad, it felt a bit more natural because it's digital, it's on off. And I guess if it was originally developed for PC, you know, you're using a keyboard or whatever, like it makes sense that that's how it would be. But with the analog stick, you didn't have that nuance. So like it would be very easy to just suddenly plow into a wall of bullets because you've just nudged the stick slightly.
I don't want to do this now.
But there was, for the ways you can customize the characters, there is one move you can get where you can slow things down, and it makes it a bit easier to handle. But then a couple of other times, you know, it would be trying to mimic, say, shot styles that you would have in a games by a different developer, where you would slow down but be more focused and stuff like that, but you wouldn't slow down nearly enough to warrant doing it. So like there are a couple of times when the balance was a little bit off and things like that, or it felt to me like it was a little bit off. Yeah. And I did not have enough time to drill into this properly and like properly work out what was going on with it. But gameplay wise, generally, again, like fine, functional, fun. Yeah, sure, sometimes, but like if you're playing it on novice and you're playing it with a certain character that has already got like baked in ways to make the game easier, it borderline's boring, which is for a shmup is kind of cardinal sin territory.
That's the worst, isn't it?
Yeah. But as soon as you bump the difficulty back up a little bit and you get into some of the mechanics where you have to fly really close to the bullets to like recharge your mana and then use that to do special moves and stuff like that. Like you can get some good mileage out of it.
All I'm going to say is it's on you for trying it on easy. You know I don't believe in it.
Well, it did help learn, but at the same time, it definitely took away from the fun of it. And like a good easy mode will teach you stuff and it will still be fun in its own right. That's the trick. And it's not an easy thing to do.
I've had to put quite a few retro games, which I'll probably come on to at some point in the pod that I've been playing recently, back onto easy because they're too hard on medium. That is it. Well,
absolutely.
And then when I come across that, and I've got a very, very specific example in my head, which I'll share at some point in the pod, where you cannot physically do the game on easy, and you've tried about 80 times, and you're not a bad gamer. That is just... What is the point? What is the point in being alive at that point? I just don't understand. That is insane.
It's a fair question.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said. I know we've talked about it previously when we talked to Nathan and stuff, but I just think there is something that we could talk a bit more about, the lumpiness of difficulty of video gaming in general, because it just feels like sometimes just the scale is just all over the place in game and then comparative games as well.
Yeah, like difficulty spikes are a terrible thing.
Yeah, and it just it's just, you know, like sometimes you feel like you've just been made to pay for things, and in this circumstance it's like you should have enough difficulty in easy mode to not make it a boring game. Like as in, but
Yeah, but then I suppose like back in the day you would have literally been made to pay for it because, you know, you get to stage 3 and you suddenly have to put more coins in the machine or, you know, they want to make sure you can't finish it in one sitting because you've rented it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right.
But then I understand with an arcade game that arcade games are specific in that circumstance in so much that it's that they're designed in an era where your video game is you could only really maybe have 4 or 5 levels, so you have to give that. You've got to have that difficulty.
Yeah.
The game I'm thinking of specifically in my head is like, for example, that's from 1999. Do you know what I mean? It's just like that didn't need to exist anymore. And I still think there is games nowadays where you kind of play on them and you just think, this has just got some weird, lumpy difficulty issues where, and it's not even like they advertise themselves as a Dark Souls. Like, where it's like, you're coming in to get messed up, mate, and everyone's like, oh, that's what I'm waiting for. Me up. Yeah, no, whereas actually, you kind of go to a game, you go, this is hard, or this is too easy, and it shouldn't be. Sorry, that all came flowing out.
It's all right. I've written it down for future I mean, not the whole thing, but I've written down lumpiness of difficulty,
emotional difficulty issues
for future. I'll do you some scores.
Gimme.
Presentation. I'm going to give that a 6. Like it's pleasant enough, but at the same time, I could list so many shmups that just engage me more.
Yeah.
Story, I'm going to give that a 5. Like there's probably something to it. I just honestly would struggle to tell you what.
I mean, you told me, and I don't know what you said.
Yeah, there's something involving a train at one point. That's all I got. So moving on. Performance, I think that's another solid 6. Actually, no, I'm going to give that a 7. Like it's nearer there than not most of the time.
Yeah.
Control, it's tricky because of... No, it's not tricky. I'm giving it a 6. There are ways you can offset how it feels to play it, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that playing with the Vita as is not the way forward.
Right, okay.
Playing it, say, on a PC or a PS4, there's a PS4 version of this game. I'm pretty sure it's cross-buy or something like that. Yeah. I didn't sit down and play it with an arcade stick. Mm-hmm. I would happily assume that given how it felt to play with a D-pad on the Vita, I think playing with an arcade stick on the PS4 would be absolutely fine.
Yeah, cool.
But with the Vita stuff, less great. Gameplay, I'm going to give that a 7, because that's where Flavor Country is. There's some interesting stuff in there. It's got a lot of mechanics that I like in shmups. It's got some that are totally baffling. Like at one point I picked up, I picked up a trapezium, got a trophy for it. No fucking idea what it does. But yeah, like...
Who doesn't need you need a trapezium in your life?
Well, quite. But then at the same time, like, you finish a level, it gives you a load of numbers, it gives you a load of different categories, but it's really, really bad at explaining them. If you go into the digital manual that's included, like, you can find maths for some of them, but crucially, not all of them. And you can start eventually to work out what's tied to what. And I think you probably could start to play it for score, but it's not as intuitive as playing something like Dariusburst would be for score, where you take out a line of enemies, builds up your multiplier, go and use that multiplier to twat the boss and pick up some stuff on the way. So yeah, it's kind of a horses for courses situation, but there is some stuff there.
Okay, that gives you a solid 6.2 out of 10.
That again, like that's six was kind of where I was.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So yeah. So in total, then, I mean, if you, as we like our arbitrary scores, the shmups take it on an average of 7 out of 10 compared to 4 out of 10 to the FPSs on the PSP, which I fully expected would be the case today. I thought I'd get absolutely drilled by somebody who knows their genre inside out, and also
I really don't.
Well, okay, yeah,
go find those YouTube channels.
Comparative to me, and I think that I think it's fair. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, like I said, the FPSs on PSP were just. I feel like they were just, like I said earlier on, hamstrung by their control system, and that was just a sign of the sort of a badly designed handheld in terms of directional pads for that type of game, certainly.
For that type of game, sure, but I do know that, like, between PS1 classics or the PlayStation Minis or whatever they were that were on the PSP and stuff like that, it had some good shmups and stuff like that, and you need good directional inputs for some of those things. Yeah. But certainly for first-person shooters, the way we play them today with 2 analog sticks.
Even think about it though, like, so the original Medal of Honor, like, you had just the D-pad technically that you play on the D-pad.
Or Doom, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, Doom, but Doom is just. I think the original Doom is just you've got your. I think horizontal, and there's no vertical in that. You can shoot.
Shoot like you auto target.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which works really well. It's a really elegant solution.
And I remember Medal of Honor. So you hold. I think it's L2 or R2 on the original PlayStation controller, and then that gives you your axes that you then move around from there.
Oh, like GoldenEye?
Yeah, just like GoldenEye, yeah, sorry. And that works probably better. Like, at least you know what you've got and what you're doing there. Like, as in, so...
Yeah.
It's, probably a bit more duck hunt. Like, it's in terms of, like, you have to stand still while you're shooting your enemies, but... You know what you're doing then, don't you? Yeah. Whereas this, both those games felt like a bit of a hodgepodge of both, really. So, and you expected more, 10 years later on the PSP. So, anywho, lesson learned. I won't play any more FPS
Swearing off games forever.
Yeah, pretty much. I won't ever play a game ever again. But we will, because next week we're going to introduce something a little bit different. What are we doing next week?
I'm looking forward to this. We're doing our first free play.
Yeah.
So free play one. We can play whatever the hell we like.
Nice.
So bye Vita, bye PSP. I assume you might be playing.
I mean, it would make sense to do that, wouldn't it? So,
but we'll both be picking something different. We assume different.
That would be so messed up if we picked the same game.
The odds would be astronomical.
We agree on a lot of things, but to telepathically agree on the one game.
Everybody started playing Metal Gear Solid 3.
So, yeah, and we're going to go with a little bit of a bit of a fun feel. It'll be a mystery game to each other, so we won't know what we're bringing to the party. And we're going to try to guess what the review would be, I think, aren't we? In terms of, so from the way it's described, we'll try and guess what score the person would give and see whether we're right. So, just something a little bit different. And we're going to try and do that once a month, we talked about, didn't we? So
I think so, yeah.
So now we've got, that whole 424 downloads, it's definitely time to change it up. So, but thanks for listening again this week, guys. Really enjoyed it. So, and we will speak to you again soon.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.